Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the afternoon session of the Law Society of Hong Kong's Forum on Doing Business in Hong Kong in a Rapidly Changing World. I'm Beryl Wu, member of the Law Week 2023 Organizing Committee of the Law Society of Hong Kong.
I'm Robert Sitt, member of the Recreation and Sports Committee of the Law Society of Hong Kong. It is our pleasure to facilitate this afternoon event.
Without further ado, let's now begin our discussion of Session 3, Hong Kong, an International Financial Center. In this session, speakers will share their insights on the challenges and opportunities for the financial industry and the professional services sectors in Hong Kong under the rapid change of world, and how to bolster a high degree of confidence from investors and enterprises from all around the world for doing business in Hong Kong.
If you have any questions to our speakers, please write it down on the question slip and hand it over to our colleagues. Or alternatively, type your questions in the Q&A box during and after the presentation.
Now, please join me in welcoming the moderator of this session, Mr. C.M. Chen, President of the Law Society of Hong Kong.
Thank you very much, Cheryl and Robert. These are the upcoming lawyers of the Law Society. I'm really hoping to give them more opportunities to host this sort of international conference. For those, first of all, welcome and thank you for staying for the afternoon session. This is the third session of the day. For those who have missed the morning session, the first session we had a very thorough discussion about the dispute resolution role of Hong Kong. We had two former Secretary for Justices attending the session. The second session, we talked in depth about the Greater Bay Area, which is again a very important initiative for China and Hong Kong. Afternoon session, this is the third session, like I said, we'll be talking about Hong Kong as an international financial center. Of course, Hong Kong's is very resilient after what happened since 2019 and also the pandemic. Mainly, if you ask me as a lawyer, it's because of our core value, the rule of law, which is really fundamental and the cornerstone of our success. In this session, we'll be looking into the opportunities and challenges in the financial industry and the professional services sector in Hong Kong under the rapid pace of changes and how the city can bolster a high degree of confidence from investors and enterprises from across the world for doing international business in Hong Kong. And like all previous panel, we have a very distinguished panelists today with us. First of all, we have Ms. Alice Law. Alice is the Chief Executive Officer of Asia Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association. It is an independent regional trade association with over 165 member firms, comprising a diverse range of leading financial institutions from both the buy side and also the sell side, right? Prior to joining the association, Alice was a financial regulator, having held various senior positions in the city's mandatory provident fund, MPF schemes, the authority, and also SFC, the Securities and Futures Commission. Alice has been a council member of the World Economic Forum since 2014, a very prestigious forum in the world, and was the co-chair of the forum's Global Future Council on Responsive Financial Systems between 2020 and 2022. She was appointed as an adjunct professor in the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong in 2022. Our second speaker of today, Ms. Laurence LI, SC, Senior Counsel. Of course, Laurence is a barrister by profession, and he's a Senior Counsel. He is currently the Chairman of the Financial Services Development Council, which is an advisory body to the Hong Kong government on matters relating to the development of the city as an international financial center. Laurence is a practicing barrister, as I said. He focuses on banking, commercial, company, and securities law. Prior to being called to the Hong Kong bar, he worked in a law firm in New York and the SFC, Securities and Futures Commission in Hong Kong. Laurence is a judge of the International Court and Regulatory Tribunal in Doha, Qatar. He's also a fellow, honorary fellow, senior fellow at local universities and their financial institutes. Thank you, Laurence. Our third speaker of today is Tim Loy. Everybody knows Tim. Tim is the chairman of the SFC, the Securities and Futures Commission, for those who are not familiar with Hong Kong, which is the regulator of our financial sector. It's an independent statutory body, regulate Hong Kong's securities and futures market. Tim is also a director of the Academy of Finance and member of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority's Exchange Fund Advisory Committee and Banking Advisory Committee. Tim is a fellow member of the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and he served as its president in 1997. He's also the chairman of the University Grants Committee and a member of the Public Service Commission. During his career at a leading accounting firm, not sure whether I should read it out, but he was a senior tax partner, lead director of the board of partners, and a member of the firm's global board, which is a Big Four accounting firm. Thank you, Tim. Last but not least, of course, we have Paul McCOMB. Paul is the executive director of British Chamber of Commerce, BritCham, in Hong Kong. BritCham is one of the Hong Kong's largest business organizations, representing a broad span of British, Hong Kong, and international companies doing business in or with or even through Hong Kong. Mr. McComb Paul was until recently the director of UK exports at the UK Department for International Trade. Paul set up the UK Department for International Trade following Brexit in 2016, and I'm sure he's happy to talk about Brexit today. Followed this with a 4-year tour in Hong Kong as Director General for Trade and Investment. In Hong Kong, Paul was responsible for the GREAT, G-R-E-A-T, GREAT, Festival of Innovation in 2018. This festival created a strong impetus to secure an agreement between the UK and Hong Kong government to promote innovation in smart cities, fintech, healthcare, AI, and robotics. And I'm sure we have a lot of questions on that as well. So these are the very distinguished panel. Let's give them a round of applause. So this is how I'll moderate this session. I'll let the speakers go on the podium, I hope, okay? Speak for however long you want, 10 minutes maybe? Well, let's see. Do their presentation, and they'll come back, and then I'll open up the floor for questions and comments. And I also have some comments myself. So without further ado, may I first invite Alice to do your presentation. Alice, thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, President, for opening the panel, and good afternoon to our panel speakers and everyone in the audience. It's a great pleasure to be speaking with you on this topic of Hong Kong as an international financial center and how we can be more competitive going forward in the light of all the challenges. One of the challenges I have to overcome is I did not expect myself to be standing up and speak at the podium, but since this is directive of President, I will just abide. So let me first start by actually giving you a bit of a background who a SIFMA is. Those who are in the financial market in particular, who are active in the capital markets, they probably know our name. And as to what a SIFMA is doing, we call ourselves Advocate, being the collective voice of the practitioners in the Asia-Pacific capital markets. So we're not just Hong Kong focused, but we're also Asia-Pacific focused. So in my presentation today, I'm going to divide it up into 4 parts. As I mentioned, a SIFMA is an independent regional trade association. President just mentioned 165. We just crossed the mark of 170 last month. So we have got 170 member firms. On our board, we've got 20 GSIB. For those who know what GSIB is, the globally important, systemically important banks are sitting on our board. And it is truly an independent association funded only by membership dues in the region. And we also represent the sell side and buy side together. We have asset managers, banks, securities firms, professional firms, fintech, and market structure service providers, including Shanghai Clearing Houses on our board. Former board members include Google, as well as current membership, we've got AWS, the cloud service provider. So this is almost a complete ecosystem within the membership that we can tap into for expertise as well as honest feedback. For those who probably have been dealing with ASIFMA will know that ASIFMA is known for, apart from its professional knowledge and extensive network, we are also known for being very outspoken. So obviously I don't doubt the choice of ASIFMA as a panel speaker, but bear in mind we will be very straightforward and really be honest to the feedback that we gather from the members when we share with you some of the findings about Hong Kong's recent competitiveness. So just over the last 12 months, I think everyone had been, been going through a lot of, ups and downs, including borders opening, some of the previous restrictions on travel being lifted. That is good news to all of us here in Hong Kong. And even with this rather challenging times, ASIFMA actually looked at what happened in a universe in Asia-Pacific capital markets. We noticed that all the regional capital markets are thriving to become a financial center, okay, for a leading financial center in the region. So competition is not lacking. So Hong Kong actually has to stay afloat and also stays ahead in order to maintain its leading capacity as the IFC. So in order to be an IFC, the first thing is the I, international. And I think just anecdotally, the composition of our association represents a lot because we have to interact with all parts of the capital markets, ranging from Korea down to Mumbai, right? So we have to be able to entertain all our members who have operations on the ground for their securities dealings and also for their network here. So I took a look, actually, I do a statistics across my staff profile, and I'm sure in Hong Kong, we love to have this mix of profile as well for our expertise and talents in the years to come. And I noticed that actually across my staff, which is only 27 right now, I've got over 10 languages being spoken and 4 dialects. So the 10 languages includes, of course, Chinese English, but we have Bulgarian, Russian, language, okay, not the person, Belgian, French, Japanese, Hindu, Filipino. Dialect, Shanghainese, Cantonese, of course, Hainanese, Tianjinese. I think this is the beauty of Hong Kong, being able to have this mixture of talents from all over the world. We keep a very open door policy for ourselves when we bring in talents as far back as Mumbai. We've got somebody who speaks Hindu in our office, who can interact with the Indian stock markets, with SEBI, with our fellow regulators. We've got people who can speak their dialect, so talking to our Shanghai Clearing House member, that will not be a problem if they choose to speak in Shanghainese. So I think this is really the background against which I would like to sort of give you as to what we hope to see in the years to come. Hong Kong will maintain its leading edge, being really the financial center in Asia. But I think all cannot be done without evidence, as lawyers always resort to. And so I have to go back to something that the association itself has done as a matter of survey. Now, I have to heavily caveat, this is a snapshot survey. I know people will start gathering tomatoes and want to throw at me, because if you read the survey, this is quite out of, obviously, the mainstream thinking. So hold your tomatoes for the time being, and I'll just give you a bit of a background. This is a snapshot survey that actually we conducted just in the depth of pandemic last year. And you can see this is a sentiment survey. When we say sentiment, is people actually rank 1 to 10 based on their understanding their own operational experience. We survey our members, and interestingly, one thing for sure is despite all the pandemic restrictions, travel difficulties, challenges in the healthcare areas, almost two-thirds of the survey respondents, which happen to be our investment banks, asset managers, infrastructure we just mentioned, they still see APAC as really the growth area. They want to expand their business operations. This is at the depth already of pandemic. And the key attractions of being here, to stay here, not just in Hong Kong, but overall in APAC, is we've got excellent workforce, very dedicated workforce in Asia, excellent trading and exchange infrastructure in some of the leading regional hubs like Hong Kong, Singapore, China also included with all these connect schemes. And then what is more important, this is really to the point of being a lawyer and proud to be a lawyer by training, is transparent regulatory policy. That is so important. As part of the business community, it is very important we have the certainty. We offer them the transparency. And SFC, I'm not actually I'm saying this is definitely SFC or others, not because I graduated from the SFC, but across our members, respondents, SFC and MAS and CSRC, they are considered one of the really open and transparent and being prepared to talk regulators. Now, they may have differences in stance, but doesn't mean that they are not open to discussion and dialogue. And this is so important about really reforming the financial market going forward. So this is on our website, so you don't actually have to copy it. But I guess one thing I want to sort of share with you is, of course, as I said, hold your horse and don't throw your tomatoes to me, because Hong Kong actually slipped quite a bit last year from, I think it's 1 to 2, number 1 to 2 to number 4. Now, people are saying, why is it? I mean, obviously, because last year was an aberration. We had this, closure of borders and travel restrictions. But still, despite all this really headwinds, what we saw is even at this position, Hong Kong scored pretty high on first 3 top attractions. One is the workforce skills. Okay, whether the number is enough is another question. But in terms of the quality of staff in the banking, securities firms, professional firms, the entire ecosystem that I just mentioned, the workforce skills, interestingly, scores very high. It's the number 1, factor. Second, I don't think anybody would have any doubt about the efficiency and the accuracy and reliability of our trading and exchange infrastructure, including, of course, the MA's payment system, the CMU, and also all this trading system on the stock exchange. The third, which actually differentiates itself from the top 3, is our tax environment. We still actually rank pretty high in terms of tax environment, meaning the tax is very favorable to those doing business in Hong Kong. Now, these are all the good things. So I've got only 1 minute, so they want me to conclude in 1 minute. Probably I need a bit more time on this, just to also talk about the flip side of the coin. Usually, that is where the outspoken part will come into play. Unfortunately, when we survey, we have to balance out the pluses and the minuses. So we do survey our member firms on market impediments. So if we're going to leapfrog into the next generation of IFC, International Financial Center, what are the things that market players are actually looking for, in the period that we surveyed them last year? We saw that some of the top impediments will be currency control, convertibility. I think these are all applicable to those countries or capital markets which still maintain certain level of currency control. Liquidity of market is very important. So on the flip side, Hong Kong's liquidity, I think, is known to be very efficient and very deep. And then political situation. Now, that one actually has not done justice to Hong Kong, as well as international sanctions, because of what happened in the past few years. So our appeal to the policymakers is in as much as we could, the policymaker could actually talk a bit more, having more direct dialogue, actually to convince our counterparts overseas. So finally, I would like to just share the 2 slides so that you know where Hong Kong's strength should be or would be. Hang on. I think Hong Kong is standing to benefit from the infrastructure that we have been building over the last decade, which is the most important part, I think, of the market infrastructure, being all the connect schemes. That's for sure, as you can see from the slides. But the second thing is also our ability to actually provide recommendation and understand the China markets also benefit the Hong Kong market. Even as small as a SIFMA, where we have less than 30 staff, but we have 170 members, we managed to produce a 200-page SIFMA China Capital Markets white paper just end of June. And you can see the weight. It is a 200-page thing that contains 149 recommendations that we broadcast to all our counterparts in the Chinese regulatory space, including PBOC, CSRC, and FRA. So this is the brain power. That's what I'm talking about. These brain power that reside in Hong Kong community, in the financial community, will help Hong Kong to springboard to the next echelon as a leading financial center in the 22nd century. So I'm aware of time. I have to close here, and I will leave my notes with you guys if you are seriously interested in the PowerPoint. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, for a very informative presentation. And I do want a copy of your slide, by the way. Alice, in her beginning of her speech, she mentioned IFC, the first word I means international. And I forgot to mention that on site, we have over 200 attendees. Some of them left before lunch, but we have 200 physically here. We have over 2,000 registration online watching us. So this is a very international forum, and that's actually the purpose, to tell the world what's really is happening in Hong Kong, the real situation. One final note before I pass on the mic to Laurence. The Law Society of Hong Kong of course, is the regulator of all solicitors in Hong Kong, and we are very international as well. Under my membership, I have a lot of international law firms operating in Hong Kong. And talking about our office bearers, I hope my Amir won't mind. When I was the vice president, we have 3 vice presidents and 1 president. When I was the president 2 years ago, I always proud ourselves how international we are. The president, my predecessor, Lisa Pang, she's a Christian, a Hong Kong local Chinese Christian. We have Brian Gilchrist, who is a Jewish. And Mr. Amir here, Vice President, is a Muslim. And I am agnostic, maybe, I don't know. But look at this. This is typical Hong Kong. This is typical Hong Kong lawyers. We have different background, religion, and we work well, I think, together. So yes, a thumbs up. So this is all why we are here today. So thank you, Alice. I do have a lot of questions for you later on. Moving on, Laurence, sorry, I'm talking too much. Once you give me the mic, I'm like that. So Laurence, of course, the mic's over, the floor is over, it's over to you.
Thank you, thank
Laurence.
you. It's always dangerous to give a barrister the podium, since I'm almost certainly not going to respect time. I will overpromise about brevity. I always tell the judge that I intend on being 5 minutes, and 15 minutes later, the judge will smile and say, Mr. Li, didn't you say 5 minutes? I see, however, there is a clock there, and if the clock can start ticking, it would actually really help. Reminds me of when I started practice in the States. The US Supreme Court actually has a clock in front of you and a set of lights. So when it's red, thou shalt not speak. When it is green, it is your turn and you're timed. Our CFA is quite a bit more polite, except for the fact that the judges are all there to get you rather than just each other. Now, I think I am obligated to first tell you something about the FSDC. We are, like a SIFMA, also a pro-market body. We are different from a SIFMA, and also those to my left are the SFC and the chambers, in that we're a bit of a chimera. We are a mostly government-funded, not entirely government-funded, but a mostly government-funded public interest body, I underscore interest, because we are not a public body. We are governed by a board of 18 people, only one of which is ex officio, that is the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. The other 17, including the chairman, myself, have to be drawn from the market. That is actually written into our constitution. I see one, I think I earlier see a second board member in the audience. The board members are drawn from all the sectors and subsectors of the financial markets and related professional services. In the last few years, we have noticed that the financial services space has grown in complexity to a point where I can no longer say that within the 18-member board, we have everyone. For example, we are not right now have a fintech person. We did before, and so just because of rotations, we can't any longer cover absolutely everyone, but we have the benefit of having 6 committees, which are also written into our constitution, and then numerous working groups underneath. So in terms of people actively involved at any one time, we count 200 plus, and I'm quite confident to say that with 200 plus people, we do cover at least most of the sectors and subsectors in the financial services space. We are, if I may do a one-upmanship on Alice, Alice and I go way back. Even when we were back in the SFC, we like the game of one-upmanship. So sorry, Alice, I spoke second, so I get to do this to you. Not only are we outspoken, which is the word Alice used for a SIFMA, we are downright critical of the government. Politely, nicely, considerately, so on and so forth. We are the first public organization to be vocal about, for example, weighted voting rights, when everyone was either against or too shy to say much about weighted voting rights. We published a paper and we went around the circuit to say why we don't think it's the greatest idea in the world, but since others are doing it, we have to do it. So you see the tack we take, which is a very realistic one. Look, we're not going to look at this in terms of whether it is great for investors. Of course, it is best if the whole world go on strictly one share, one vote, but alas, we don't live in that sort of idealistic world, and if others are doing weighted voting rights, it will cost us too much in competitiveness not to do it. It took then the government, I think, a few years to turn around, and the new chairman, may I add, to turn around, and we now have weighted voting rights. We were most recently also the only public organization to be very vocal about cryptos and virtual assets. Again, we take a very pragmatic approach to this. Is it risky? Of course it's risky. I have myself publicly said time and again, it's going to be a bubble, it's going to be like .com, but exactly like .com. For those of you who are older in the audience, I think roughly about half, you'll remember the .com boom, and you know what the .com boom did? First, 99% of the .coms died. So let's not pretend otherwise, right? So I fully expect most of the cryptos to die. But can you now imagine a day where you don't log onto a .com before breakfast? I can't. I can't even get out of bed without logging onto a .com to check weather, to check schedule, to check news. I fully predict that in 10 years' time, you don't even need to check .coms. .coms will run your life. That iCloud and all those other things will in fact be the person or be the machine that wakes you up, turns on your coffee machine, so on and so forth. And you know what else .com did? .com turned Silicon Valley into Silicon-less Valley. If you visit Silicon Valley now, there is no silicon. We still call it Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is not about silicon. Silicon Valley is about financing, not even silicon. Silicon Valley is about financing tech. That is a rather long way of talking about the FSDC. I've just been reminded of time, so I'm going to use my remaining time to talk to you about Hong Kong. 3 strengths, very easy, 3 strengths. 1, connects in the plural. If you count the various Connect schemes we have, we've gone from Stock Connect to Bonds Connect to ETF Connect to Wealth Connect to what I call Foreign Companies Connect. So foreign companies can now qualify for Stock Connect, to Swap Connect, to dual counter. It's not known as a Connect scheme, but I count it as another form of Connect. And if you count the Connect schemes, it points to our second strength, which is renminbi internationalization. The mainland economy accounts for 18% of the world GDP in absolute terms. It is the second largest economy, 80% of the US. BRICS, on PPP terms, already overtook G7. And China is the biggest trading partner to ASEAN, to Europe, to US, and to the Middle East. But you know what? Renminbi is 0.2% of the world trading currency, 0.2, less than 0, unfortunately, actually. Last count is 0.18. and less than 1% of world reserve currencies. Just imagine the room to growth for renminbi. Third advantage we have, many of you might not have, or actually this audience you probably have realized because we are fellow lawyers. President Xi, when he came to give his speech last year at the anniversary of resumption of sovereignty, he highlighted several things. One, Hong Kong must remain international. Two, one country, two system is good for the country, not just for Hong Kong, but for the country. Three, he said twice, common law is important to Hong Kong and important to the mainland. That Hong Kong remains on the common law system is important to the mainland and its role in the international world. Common law is the only concept that the president mentioned twice in his speech. I have since actually tried very hard to find out who the speechwriter was. I've been given a number of names, but as with all things in politics, nothing is reliable, so I shall not share that information. But imagine, and I say this to a Western audience all the time, can you imagine a national leader mentioning common law or any system of law? You know what political leaders do? They talk about mother's pie. They talk about, oh, rule of law is good, independent judiciary is good. No one talks about common law is good. No one talks about civil law is good. No one talks about the actual legal system. And this comes not only from a national leader, but from a national leader of a nation that has, unfortunately, a difficult colonial past dealing with colonialism, and yet he openly recognizes the importance of common law to Hong Kong and to the mainland's role in the international arena. Why is that? And that is our third strength, is because as, for example, renminbi goes from 0.2% of trade to something more equal to its share of the world GDP, 18%, you need to have people willing to do that, right? To go from less than 0.2% to 18%. You need people to be willing to use renminbi as a trading currency. You need people to be willing to participate in your further growth. And people are willing if they interact with a system that they're familiar with. And to that extent, common law is a system that many, many people are familiar with. And it extends not just to the content of the law, but also to things we do. And an example I often use is, you know what, talking about the importance of common law is not just our securities regulation, that is squarely rooted in our common law thinking and tradition, but employment, housing. You know what, expats come to Hong Kong, the first thing they worry about? The first thing they worry about is their employment contract. The next thing they worry about is their MPF. The third thing they worry about is finding a place to live, the lease, so on and so forth, right? Employing a domestic helper, and that involves a contract, and often, by the way, that's quite a difficult one, because often it's the spouse who enters into that contract, and the spouse has a bit more time to scrutinize that contract and will bug everyone, let's say. So it is important for all of those things to happen in a common law environment, in an environment that we are familiar with, so that something as small as, why is the lease that I'm signing not registrable? Why doesn't it need to be registered? There is a common law answer to that. There is a common law tradition of short lease not needing to be registered and long leases beyond a certain date need to be registered. There is a reason behind that. And all that needs an answer, not just securities law answer. Now, I'm told time is up, but as I said, the risk of giving the barrister a podium is I am bound to breach the time limit. So until the president of the council tells me to shut up, which he won't, even the CFA wouldn't tell me to shut up. The CFA would just say, Mr. Lee, do you have anything more? Sometimes they would say, Mr. Lee, do you have anything more that is actually useful? And that takes me to the last thing I want to point out, which is the challenges. Now, I think the challenge in very broad terms is this. We used to be a bridge. It was easy being a bridge between, let's say, the East and West. You can call it between mainland China and the rest of the world. You can call it what you want. But it's easy being a bridge, because being a bridge, you just need to do two things. You need to make sure that the bridge won't crumble. So you just need to make sure the bridge is well built, well maintained. And two, you make sure that you put someone there to collect the toll. And in time, you want to make sure that the person who collects the toll is not corrupt, so you get your due share of the toll. That is a relatively easy business model. I'm afraid the East and the West mainland and the rest of the world, that relationship is now far more complex than just crossing the bridge. In the old days, you have a situation where you build a bridge, two sides actually want to interact with each other, they therefore will cross your bridge and is quite willing to pay you a toll. The relationship is very different now. And with that difference requires a completely different set of skills. I think some of the soft skills will no doubt be transferable. We talk about language ability, so on and so forth. But some of the new skills are things that we are not familiar with. We are much more familiar being a comprador. We are much more familiar with, in Cantonese terms, being a mai sao. We are very, very uncomfortable and inexperienced in thinking in strategic terms. And let me give you an example. We recently started making trips to the Middle East, and when the government asked me what I thought should be mentioned on the Middle East, I scratched my head. One, I didn't have very good ideas, and two, my only good idea was a negative one, which is please don't talk about attracting Saudi Aramco to come to Hong Kong for a second listing. You know why? It's not worth talking about it. Because if you recognize that the Middle East wants to build their financial markets, they don't need money. They've got money. There's no reason for them to come for a secondary listing. And if you go and have a conversation about, oh, we are an international financial market, please bring your Saudi Aramco here and get a secondary listing, they think you just want their money, right? Which is what everyone wants when they go to the Middle East. So what do? I say, well, let's talk about, instead of bringing Saudi Aramco here, let's talk about having Middle East EFTs in Hong Kong, ETFs in Hong Kong. So we don't actually compete with the Middle East for money. We don't compete the Middle East for business opportunities. We actually help them. We say, look, we know that you want to be financial centers in your own right. We know you want to build your financial markets. Let us help you. And the way we'll help you is, let's construct these ETFs that invest in your market to get your primary market going, to get your equities market going. And you know what? We have a major advantage because we have an ETF Connect here in Hong Kong. And as long as you get an ETF that is large enough, we can actually tap the mainland market, the mainland savings pool, for you to invest into Middle Eastern stocks. And so I got that idea, that I asked my FSDC office to look into that. You know what? We are already late in the game. London and New York already have Middle East ETFs. Now, that is just an example of how, for us to continue to be an international financial market requires a very, very different kind of thinking and somewhat a different kind of skill sets. And may I point out, again, Alice, allow me to do another one-upmanship. It's always nice because I know Alice won't be mad at me. You know what? The languages that Alice has counted did not include Arabic. And I challenge every one of you to think about whether your organization has Arabic ability. The only body I know, and I have a very narrow view, so I don't profess to know that many, the only one I know is completely by fluke. My chambers of barristers turn out to have young barristers who actually speak Arabic. And that entirely is because he's going out with a Iranian girl, I think. And he has not had the opportunity to use Arabic in his daily work. I have promised him that next time I go out to the Middle East to judge, I will find a way to bring him along and he can help me in that regard. But so let us think about not just where we can praise Hong Kong as an international financial center, but recognize that our next stage, however big that set of opportunities are going to be, however much room we have to grow, what would it take that we don't yet have? And with that, perhaps I can leave that challenge to Tim. As FSDC, as is the tradition of FSDC, we point things out, and then we say, look, government body, including the SFC, we have given you the advice, please figure it out and come up with a solution. So on that note, I will finish my speech here. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurence. Very inspiring speech indeed. I have a lot to ask you about, ranging from the geopolitical challenges to the Middle East opportunities. But by the way, I do have an Arabic-speaking vice president here. Mr. Amirali Nasir is actually the chairman of the Hong Kong Law Society Islamic Finance Committee. We set up the committee how many years ago? 10 years ago? And we actually assisted the issuance of Islamic bond by the Hong Kong government. So yes, we've been... Thank you, Laurence. But before I pass on the mic to Tim, sorry, I think I do need to actually, I just Googled, by the way, what President Xi actually said last year, 1st of July. I think it will be beneficial to the international audience. President Xi, of course, was here in Hong Kong to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return of sovereignty to China. He said, quote, "There is no reason for us to change such a good policy, i.e. one country, two systems. And we must adhere to it in the long run." This is the exact wordings, of course, President Xi spoke in Mandarin. And then he went on to say, "We must maintain Hong Kong's distinctive status and advantages to maintain the common law." That's what Laurence alluded to. President Xi mentioned common law twice in his speech last year. This is actually very interesting to me. Again, I'm not creating something. This is exact wordings from President Xi. He went on to say, quote, "The executive and the legislative branches check and balance and cooperate with each other while the judiciary exercises its power independently." This is exact wordings from President Xi. So I'm going to stop at that and leave it for you to think about. Okay, next up we have Tim to speak for us from the SFC angle. Thank you, Tim.
Well, President CM, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today, I want to speak to you as a market regulator about how the SFC steers the development of financial markets to ensure Hong Kong remains a leading capital-raising center as well as an investment hub. Our primary commitment is to build quality markets through world-class regulation and in the process, instill investor confidence in our markets. This is key to strengthen Hong Kong's status as a premier global financial hub, connecting China and overseas markets, as well as a preferred fund domicile in the region. As you well know, Hong Kong has a very mature financial services industry. The total market capitalization of the Hong Kong stock market is about $4 trillion. Our unique connections with mainland markets help attract overseas investment, as well as provide fundraising opportunities to a wide range of Chinese enterprises. Despite a very challenging macro landscape in the past 3 years, we have seen progress on many fronts. The number of listed companies actually grown by 5%. The number of Hong Kong domicile funds rose 20%. And just in the past year, the number of corporations licensed by the SFC has also grown by 5%. But in order to develop financial markets in changing times, I would like to make a few points. The first point is to help maintain this particular momentum. The SFC adopts an agile regulatory approach to help ensure sustainable market development during changing times. Agility is especially important in times of high interest rate, monetary tightening, and heightened geopolitical tensions. Mainland enterprises now account for more than 80% of our stock market by capitalization. So one of our main strategies has been to adapt our listing regime to facilitate the listing of new economy companies from Greater China. Nowadays, these companies account for 40% of our market capitalization, providing very attractive opportunities to investors looking to tap into the high-growth sectors of the Chinese economy. Specifically, we introduced new regimes over the years for greater voting rights, biotech companies, specialist tech companies, and the homecoming of some overseas listed Chinese firms. Well, while all these changes we may accommodate some pre-profit or even we call pre-revenue companies, we remain steadfast to protect investors and ensure an orderly market. In the case of the specialist technology listing regime, we have put in sufficient rail guards to make sure that that is the case. Our new licensing regime for virtual assets, which came into existence last month, is another example of how we have kept pace with emerging market trends and embraced innovation at the same time, such as Web3 and blockchain. We recognize that if reasonably used, technologies can certainly drive efficiency and as well as reduce costs. The new regime, the first of its kind anywhere, was designed to allow retail access to virtual assets services, but with very robust investor protection as the key. The second point, as made by some of earlier speakers, is that we need to continue to strengthen Hong Kong's role as the premier gateway to mainland China markets. Since the launch of the Connect program back in 2014, our mutual market access programs have been a great success. Nowadays, the cumulative net inflows since the launch of the Connect programs total 2.3 trillion renminbi southbound and 1.9 trillion renminbi northbound. So mutual market access is a key part of our long-term strategy, and we have been working with our local and mainland counterparts to strengthen the Connect programs. We recently took steps to include foreign companies listed in Hong Kong, as well as mainland listed small and medium enterprises into the Connect schemes. And we are in the process of making further enhancement to the Wealth Connect schemes as well. And over the past 20 years, Hong Kong has developed into the top offshore renminbi hub in the world. And we're making sure the city continues to lead in this particular area. Just last month, the stock exchange introduced a dual counter model to promote stock trading in renminbi. This will encourage investors to use renminbi in their offshore investments and promote the expansion of listed renminbi products. Under this model, the dual counter market making program also brings in market makers to create and ensure liquidity and minimize the Hong Kong dollar renminbi share price gaps. So besides to expand on our offshore risk management toolkit for investors, Swap Connect was launched in May to enable investors to hedge investment risk through mainland and Hong Kong derivatives markets. The third point is that the SFC is completely committed to building market resilience and managing systemic risk to ensure a healthy market in the long run. To guard against instability, our day-to-day work revolves around supervision and monitoring of markets and market participants, including exchanges, clearinghouses, brokers, and funds. And to preempt systemic risk, we closely watch the operations of the Hong Kong markets, which are open and globalized, and we monitor capital flows on a daily basis. Our surveillance extends from the spot exchange market to derivatives, futures, and over-the-counter markets, as we monitor the build-up of short positions and watch for any signs of concentration of positions in OTC's derivatives. The Hong Kong Investor Identification Regime now provides us with real-time investor identification information behind each trade. This facilitates our enforcement by helping us spot irregularities, deter misconduct, and facilitate our enforcement actions. And the SFC also supervises the Hong Kong Exchange and Clearing Limited. Our top priority here is to ensure that the risk management practices can withstand extreme market shocks. We also closely supervise licensed brokers, their risk management, and prevent over-leverage. So we are particularly concerned about the margin lending risk and stress test them for capital adequacy. As for SFC authorized funds, we monitor their liquidity on a regular basis, and we talk to them when necessary. The fourth point is driving efficiency for the markets. By promoting market efficiency is another key focus for SFC. And we believe technology and digitalization are instrumental here. So one of our main objectives in launching the new licensing regime for virtual assets trading platform is to promote innovation and technology and help Hong Kong develop into a fintech hub. Technology should help deliver efficiency gains by streamlining processes and the settlement cycle for investment products. And internally, we have digitalized all our licensing platforms, and it has cut down the processing time by more than 20% year to year, and long outstanding application number has gone down by half. The last point that I want to make is we work closely with global and mainland regulators and authorities to set standards for capital markets and their development. International collaboration is essential to help maintain Hong Kong's high regulatory standards. At the International Organization of Securities Commission, OSCO, our senior executives play very important roles there in different task force and work streams. So we are fully represented at that level. And the SFC also work closely with our mainland counterparts, the CSRC, on cross-border supervision and enforcement, mutual market scheme access, and renminbi internationalization. So we'll continue with that work, and we have regular high-level meetings every 6 months. So in view of the time, I want to wrap up. I want to say that the SFC's vision for our financial markets can be summed up in just a few words, and that is agile, connected, resilient, and efficient. The ultimate aim of all our regulatory work is to enable sustainable market development which serves the needs of the real economy and the society at large. And we hope you all share this vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim, for a very brief but yet an overview of the regulator, SFC, the role of regulator, and various new regimes coming out. For example, the dual renminbi counter model, the virtual assets, which is a very important step in the right direction. We definitely have time to talk about more, hopefully later, Tim. So last but not least, may I now invite Mr. Paul McCOMB to say a few words to us. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, CM. Thank you, panelists. I think one of the things about going last, after listening to the speeches, you're scribbling away thinking, I want to say something else now. But what I'm going to give you this afternoon is what we've agreed as a foreigner's view. I've been back in Hong Kong for about 5 weeks. So had you invited the executive director of BritCham 5 weeks ago, you'd have got another lawyer on the panel. So you don't have a lawyer today, you've got a public servant. I've spent 3 decades working for the British government, 4 years as a diplomat in Hong Kong. So I've got some sort of history here. In that time, I've played some pretty big leadership roles, first of all in the financial crisis in 2008, and helping the country deal with quite deep economic problems at that time, mass unemployment, all sorts of things like that. Brexit, you mentioned it. I thought I had a cushy job working for our UK Trade and Investment Organisation. 6 months later, we voted to leave the EU, and I was asked to set up the new Department for International Trade. We didn't even know what a trade deal was or what it looked like back in 2016, so that was quite a hill to climb. And then COVID, which was, of course, a global phenomena, and the whole world had to deal with that. The list goes on. And I can't remember who mentioned the point around assessing the sort of geopolitical risk, etc. That's not a unique problem to any one part of the world. I was on a finance panel in April in London, and I think more generally, lots of businesses around the world are struggling to price in the uncertainties of the geopolitical situation. And there's two ways you go there. One is you get clever people to keep guessing for you what might happen, or you do something about calming down the geopolitical tensions, get dialogue moving, and try and bring certainty back to the way we all operate across the world and the business world. So I'm pleased to see that there is dialogue happening, and we see where that takes us. But I think most businesses, when they are planning, what they like more than anything is certainty. When the risk factor goes up, then they're into a worrying place, and they're trying to second guess, where should I go, what should I do next? So I do want to touch on, though, a bit of past, present, future from my perspective as a sort of foreigner here. So before I came to Hong Kong, so this is back in sort of 2017, I think, to be honest, we'd forgotten Hong Kong. From the seat I was in within the British government, it was all China, doing business with China, entering China directly. And people started to say, well, do we need Hong Kong? Let's just go straight into China. And I remember speaking to my boss at the time, who was in Beijing, and saying, what's the view up there on Hong Kong? He goes, no one's talking about it, which I thought was really quite interesting. And then I started to look at actually the numbers and the money and the trade flows and the investment flows. And the thing that was striking was 1/3 of all UK trade with China was through Hong Kong. So Hong Kong had a huge role to play there. On the foreign direct investment, the vast majority of the money came through Hong Kong in both directions. So despite the fact people talking about go straight and do business with China, actually, if you started to look at the numbers, a huge amount of value was coming through Hong Kong. And actually, a lot of that goes back to the point that was made around common law. I had the pleasure of going to Astana when it was on its journey to become an international financial centre with Lord Justice Wolfe, who was the chair of the Astana International Financial Centre. And what they do in these IFCs, particularly the new ones, is they start by creating an enclave, they put some buildings there, they adopt common law, and then they find the best people that they can put in charge of the governance of that IFC. What Hong Kong has is that in spades. And what these other sort of newer IFCs are working towards, there's some distance of it. So, so the thing that I think struck me reflecting before I came to Hong Kong is we'd sort of forgotten a bit about the importance of Hong Kong. When I got here, I was delighted to be the director for the Great Festival of Innovation in 2018. That was a 75 million Hong Kong dollar 4-day event, which celebrated UK, Hong Kong trade and the region, focusing on how we would live, work and play. Oh God, I'm going to be out of time as well. And how we live, work and play in the future. The reason I mention that is because that was a huge, I think, investment of the UK in its relationship with Hong Kong. And that was 2018. That wasn't that long ago. Now, relationships have been through challenges, in recent times. And as I say, the importance of dialogue and the importance of people talking and working through those challenges is what is important. But again, I would say, having gone back to the UK in 2021 for 2 years, we were dealing with the fallout of Brexit. Thousands of small firms had no idea how to trade with the EU that they've been trading with for decades. We had a lot of political change. And of course, we had the impact of the war in Ukraine. So again, I would just emphasize we're not alone. The world has got its own version of these different challenges and has been working that through. So much so that it wasn't a big decision for me, frankly, to come back to Hong Kong when the opportunity presented itself, because I'm always optimistic about the future. But I do want to share a few numbers, if I may. So getting to the present, this will probably surprise you, but Hong Kong is one of the UK's top export markets. You're number 9 in our list of export markets. We export more to Hong Kong than we do to Japan, to India, definitely Singapore, which I know always goes down well with the Hong Kong audience. And that's quite striking, actually. People don't realize quite the quantum of trade that goes on there. When I got back, people said to me, and I say back 5 weeks ago, how does it feel? You know, you were here before, you've come back. And my feeling is it's a bit like when the UK was coming out of lockdown. Okay, there was a bit of hybrid working going on. Are we doing face-to-face? Actually, some businesses were questioning their business model and the way they operated. And if I'm honest, it feels to me a little bit like we're still in that phase. And maybe people thought when the borders were open, it was going to bang and everyone's back to normal. My sense is it takes some time to adjust, not just because people are kind of readapting, but also I think a lot of people discovered themselves and other things in their life during COVID. The number of people who lost weight, changed their diets, went walking, took up exercise, got closer to their families. The world has changed in that period of time, and work has to reintegrate into that. I do actually think, and I can say this with confidence, that the government here are actually doing quite a lot. So, you know, I see the experience of governments in other parts of the world, and I think they are doing quite a lot and open to doing more. So for me, just to sort of wrap up a little bit, looking to the future, what do I think? First of all, I think keep the basics, keep common law, keep one country, two system, and clearly the endorsement is there. Keep low taxation, and relentlessly focus on market access and have a competitive mindset. If there's something that makes it harder to do business here than somewhere else, deal with it. What can you do to remove those? And you know, we've learned this in the UK when we left the EU. We have loads of market access barriers that we have to remove. And if we don't remove them, we will lose our competitive edge. And I think Hong Kong should have that lens of, is it harder to do business here than somewhere else? And if it is, deal with the problem, be specific and focus on that. I think secondly, promote the business opportunities. And what I would say is get more into the projects and the specifics. I think the ideas, like the GBA has turned on a big part of the UK business audience, but they want to go to the next stage. So what does that mean in a practical sense? And they love it when you get into real practical projects where they can see a role for themselves and they can do some business. I also think some ideas that the government may want to consider is the idea of sort of joint business and government councils, particularly when you start to look at the race to net zero. It's not going to be just the government's role or just businesses' role or even us as, you know, citizens. It's a partnership, and we've got to play joint roles. And we've done a lot in the UK around things like Jet Zero councils, green investment councils, where you get business and government co-producing the sort of strategies, the plans that are needed. So I think when promoting business ideas, it's bringing business into that conversation as well. And then my final point is promote the city. You know, the cultural offer, the sporting offer, the entertainment offer, the great food. When we voted in the UK to leave the EU, the very first thing I was asked to do was to find out, why do people invest in the UK? And in the league table of reasons why people invest in the UK, our membership of the EU was 7. The list above was good education, good cultural offer, you know, rule of law. These sorts of things matter much, much more than some of those other, shall we say, technocratic things. So I will leave you with one message, which is short, which is be ambitious, be adaptable, and keep being Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think I do need to actually take my hats off to the organizing committee in coming up the recommendation to invite Brit Cham, for example, instead of M Cham. Sorry. No. that was a bad joke. I did actually send an invitation to the U.S. Consulate General. I think anyone from the U.S. Consulate still in the room. I think they did send a representative this morning, and so did many other consulate generals. Precisely because what Paul has said, because of the history, Hong Kong and the UK take the legal profession for an example. Many of us are actually still English lawyers. I'm still holding a practicing certificate from the Law Society of England and Wales. I'm actually still a consultant of a London law firm, albeit a part-time role. So the connection is there. And more importantly, for today's purposes, of course, is common law. Being invented, created by the United Kingdom. That's the thing that's really the common thread throughout the common law community. And we've discussed already that it's essential that we maintain that tradition. So you've now heard all the speakers. I think the next stage is for Q&A, and I think I've already received some questions. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go around one question for each of the speaker, and then if still have time, I'll open up the floor for questions. Okay, the first one for Alice. There's a question for you about competition. How do we fare when compared with Singapore?
Right, as I have already shown with you, shared with you some of the survey, I think there are some undeniable facts. We have to actually admit that we have our strength, but we also have areas that we need to improve as an international financial center. We just mentioned that there are different strengths, like Hong Kong has a very deep equities market, hugely efficient market structure, but in terms of Singapore, they also has a very strong commodities market as well as FX market. We all know about it. Lifestyle, as Paul just alluded to, has recently kind of overtaken because of what you saw in the survey about the political uncertainty, about the international sanctions. And we shouldn't forget the fact that perception is reality. A lot of times, and I really commend all the government officials and FSDC efforts to do more promotion. And obviously, Hong Kong is a good friend, and I heard that Eddie, you probably he's never set his foot on Hong Kong now. So he has to fly all over the globe just to promote Hong Kong and make the perception right. I think it needs a lot of time to say, you know, actually which one is better, and really we have to play up to our strength. So my advice is don't waste a crisis. We have a pandemic, and it actually has really produced a lot of negative impact on the confidence of people. And as you all know now, a lot of the capital is actually sitting on the fence, waiting to be convinced one way or the other. So I think we should not lose heart of the fact that fundamentally, as Paul just mentioned, there are already quite a solid foundation, the backrock of common law system, the bedrock of actually a very versatile and agile population. In our survey, interestingly, work skills, quality of work here, ranked very top. So the agility, to the point of Tim, is so important in a finance market. We're not talking about any other parts. You know, for a SIFMA, we're only talking about capital markets. The ability to detect business opportunities, to tap the market, go into and invest, and make the biggest return on investment is the aim of the capital markets practitioner. So if we can maintain that leading edge, and don't forget other parts of Asia market is also copying and chasing up. India, case in point. The people we met from the India government, they say we are building the gift city. I'm sure you have heard about the gift city. But they say, you know what, it is modeled upon Hong Kong. So they're very proud. They say, we are building a Hong Kong in India. So these are really good things. We shouldn't be too skeptical. I know sometimes Hong Kongers tend to be very skeptical and critical of oneself, but we should also look at the bright side, that we become the leading role model around in the region. People are actually chasing our, but we shouldn't just sit still. We cannot be the rabbit and sit still. We just have to keep running. So this is my advice.
Thank you, Alice. You reminded me a forum that I attended a few years ago. I was promoting Hong Kong legal services, and I said that Hong Kong common law tradition English being widely spoken, official language, and majorities, Chinese, ethnic Chinese, understand the culture, blah, blah, blah. And then everybody said, yeah, we agree with you, Mr. Chen. And then my friend from Singapore stood up. He said, yes, I agree with you, Mr. Chen, just that we did it better than you, you know. Anyway, there's actually, I was told that we have online audience from Singapore. So hello, my Singaporean friends. We are not real competitors, but we are really looking at each other, what's going on, and compare notes. Thank you. Laurence, you made a very, very convincing talk about giving us an example about doing business in the Middle East. Why Hong Kong can play a role in that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that one?
I will, and I promise that it's a fascinating question in its own right. But could I also answer the Singapore question? First, I would say, regardless of who does it better, where would you fancy your chances suing the government? And I think that tells you who does it better. And I think fundamentally, from a finance point of view, Hong Kong and Singapore are pursuing different strategies. Not even fair to compare the two. Hong Kong is going to be an IFC. It is an IFC. It is going to be an IFC. Singapore wants to be an IFSC, an international financial services. And that's for a very simple reason. You can't be an international financial center without a real economy. Finance cannot exist if you have nothing to finance. And therefore, you need a huge economy to finance for you to be an international financial center. Hong Kong has that opportunity. It has been given that task. Now, that has cost. Hong Kong is essentially going to be on a plan, on a trajectory to be London. What took London 400 years to do, we are trying to do in 40 years. The opportunities are huge. The social cost is huge. Let's not downplay that. London had 400 years to solve, if you become really expensive, what do you do? It has figured a way to even out some of the unevenness. 40 years is a far shorter time. And that's a big challenge. Singapore does not even want that model. It's not that they can't, the opportunities are not there. They don't want it, because while we in Hong Kong could offer solutions such as, we become part of the Greater Bay Area, it will help solve some, not all, of the social cost. Singapore cannot go to the Singaporeans and say, you just live in your huba roof. It's politically unacceptable, right? So one must recognize that there are a lot of things we can learn from each other, and definitely Hong Kong can learn a lot from Singapore government's marketing ability and getting their song sheet right, so on and so forth. But fundamentally, we're very different. And to give you a number that shows this, private equity. We talk about the stock exchange, so on and so forth, because it's visible, the numbers are easy to get. But really, the finance cycle has gotten a lot earlier, right? The money is not made from IPOs much anymore. It's made from private equity, from the earlier investment. And so I asked for that number. The US private equity industry is slightly dated numbers now. This is about a year ago. 1,600 billion US. Mainland China is roughly half of that, 800 billion US, number 2. Europe, ex-UK, is about 600 billion US. UK itself is about 500 billion US. So Europe, including UK, would overtake the mainland. Hong Kong, as a city alone, is number 5, 200 billion US. Hong Kong alone. And one must also take into account that most of the private equity in Hong Kong is actually porous with the mainland, right? Singapore, 40 billion US. And most of it invests in the mainland, right? So it's actually telling you that the two cities are pursuing very different strategies. Now, where Singapore does a lot better, because they are pursuing an IFSC strategy, is attracting those functions in financial markets that can provide the service away from the location of the market. Okay? So they do quite well attracting regional functions that doesn't have to be tied to the market location. But ultimately, one recognizes that our job is to be the international financial center for the mainland and therefore Asia, because again, you come back to the fundamentals. You need the economy. We're talking about a very different game that we're pursuing. Now, second answer, and I think my first answer in many ways answered the second answer. Why and what is the biggest advantage we have in the, what a London think tank has called, and I like the way they call it, the Middle Eastern pivot to Asia. And this comes from, by the way, one of the reasons why I think when it comes to the Middle East, one has to look to London. If you just go to London, I came back yesterday from a 4-week family trip to Europe. Last stop was London, and you just need to go out and you see. I mean, they don't even just have Arabic capability. They have Arabic population. They have Arabic communities, right? And that has a lot to do with, I like to think, because it's my namesake, Lawrence of Arabia, not the person, but the history. But the history. When I go out, Paul mentioned Astana. I'm an arbitrator in Astana. When I go out, you know what? Friday night drinks are hosted by the British Embassy. And I went up to the British Embassy drinks because the Astana financial people said, Lawrence, you know, the Friday night drinks. The Friday night thing to do is to go to the British Embassy drinks. So I went. And the first person I had a long conversation with was from the French Embassy. And I thought to myself, you know, if the French Embassy people come to the Friday drinks of the British Embassy, it actually says something about the Brits' understanding of that part of the world. Now, Astana is, probably doesn't count as Middle East, but one sees the deep knowledge that one has about the Middle East that the Brits is a major advantage of them. And let me give you in very real terms. When, this is not Middle East, this is Russian money. When sanctions were imposed on Russia, some financial market people asked me, Lawrence, can we quietly attract some Russian money? I said, well, first, very quietly. Two, we didn't actually go promote it. I don't have official numbers. But I started asking around what's happening. And you know what? Russian money, to the extent they left London, not that, I won't talk about how much they left London, no official numbers anyway. To the extent they left London, they went to Dubai. Why? Because Russian oligarchs trust their British advisors. They trust their British lawyers. They trust their British accountants. And when they ask their British lawyers and British accountants, where can I move my money to? The British advisor says, oh, we have offices in Dubai, so don't leave me. Just go to my office in Dubai. And that is sort of the history of world understanding that Hong Kong really needs to build. You can't compete in the new international game just being a bridge. You've got to bring to the table a much wider set of skills, which, again, London had 400 years of head game. They didn't just build the financial center, they built their diplomatic service, they built SOAS. My wife graduated from SOAS, so I have some association with it. They built the personal connections. And now, coming back, why we have an advantage? Because, frankly, short of 400 years of building, if anyone has to catch up, we have that advantage. Because, yes, we're really way behind in knowledge, but there is petrodollar, there are mainland opportunities, there's a pivot away from the rest of the world to Asia. And all that, put yourself in the shoes of a prince sitting out there. Yes, I mean, there are some other cities in Asia that are very interesting, but you want to go to somewhere where your yacht can park. You go to an art auction, right? You want to go to a place where your British advisors are somewhat familiar with, and yes, they're most familiar with Dubai, but Hong Kong, yes, they might not have an office today, but it's easy for them to open one. So we have all those that are going in our favor. We just need to go do it.
So on Lawrence, a very positive note on Hong Kong. Moving on to Tim. There's a question for you, Tim, about sustainable finance. So the question is, what is Hong Kong's role in the global development of sustainable and green finance, and what does the SFC, the Securities and Futures Commission, plan to do to fulfill this role? It's a rather long-worded question.
I'll try to be brief here. Green and sustainable finance is the buzzword, and I think everywhere you go, you hear about this. And Hong Kong actually has quite a lot of very important roles to play here. I think, firstly, as I said earlier, we are very much tied in with the work of IOSCO, FSB, etc. And so the recent standards pronounced by the ISSB in terms of sustainable disclosures, etc., we were very instrumental in assisting in the formulation of that. And my CEO, Julia, sits on one of the IOSCO subcommittee that vets the standard, so that IOSCO later on in July can actually formally endorse it. So we have a role to actually set the precedent and the example for the rest of a lot of our other countries, certainly for Hong Kong, but also for all the neighboring countries. We can influence that as well. So that is one of the roles that we can play. Secondly, ESG has become very important in the investment world. In terms of ESG funds in Hong Kong set up, just year by year, it has probably increased by about 50%. We have about 188 now. So there's an ongoing trend for us to develop along there. And of course, our capital markets, 80% by capitalization are mainland companies. And as you know, our nation has got very ambitious plans to peak emission by 2050 and complete and zero emission by 2060. So it's a very tall order for the country. But if we can assist in that initiative or that process, because 80% of our capital by capitalization, our companies are mainland companies. If they can comply with the standard, I think that will go quite a long way to help the nation to achieve its goals. And so we're in constant dialogue with CSRC on how we can actually do that. And lastly, is really a funding issue, because there are estimates that just in Asia alone, over the next 30 years, we need $66 trillion to deal with green and sustainable issues. It's not going to come out from the government completely, or public funds. So a lot of private funds have to be sort of encouraged. And this is where Hong Kong can play a role as a capital market. And if we are also complying with international standards, I think we can mediate, overseas markets funds as well to meet the needs of, the factories or the enterprises on the mainland, as well as other Asian countries. So there's a lot that we can do, and the SFC has been doing that. We co-chair with the HKMA Green Finance Steering Committee that incorporates government bureaus and federal regulators to move the agenda ahead in Hong Kong. We have mandated fund managers with a code of conduct to actually look into the investment decisions by the lens of green and sustainable finance. And we're currently in dialogue with the exchange to come up with a final consultation paper on climate disclosures in futures audited statements of companies. So we are doing quite a lot in this respect, and but it needs the effort of everybody to make it happen. Thank you.
Well, needless to say, we are not here to give any investment advice, but hearing from Tim, seems to be carbon credit trading seems to be a good opportunity. Anyway, don't take my word seriously. Finally, to Paul. This question is slightly sensitive in a way. We talk about a lot of geopolitical risk. The relationship, I'm talking about governmental level, between the UK and Hong Kong and China, of course, has become somewhat strained in the past few years. From Hong Kong's perspective, for those who are not familiar, Hong Kong, under the Basic Law, we have our own Court of Final Appeal. And it's under the Basic Law that the Court of Final Appeal may invite foreign judges to sit on our top court to hear cases. So it's actually a 5 judges panel, so we may invite one from overseas. And obviously, if you follow the news, the UK government already said that they will not send any more incumbent UK judges to sit on Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal. That's actually one of the examples that I'm trying to get to, the question trying to get to. Given that rather difficult relationship between the governmental level, how do you see the relationship between the business community going forward?
Oh, I'm glad you put it back to the business community. I mean, I made some remarks before, and I'm sort of serious. Dialogue is the start. If you're not talking to each other and not listening to each other, then you can't make progress. And it's absolutely clear there are different opinions on different things. I think looking at this through a sort of business lens, I mean, the sense is actually just get on with doing business. Get on with re-engagement. Because if you sit and wait to see what happens when things will get sort of into a different place, you could be sitting around for a long time and missing, frankly, the opportunity to sort of get on. So my sense is, we're starting to see senior visitors coming through from the UK. We have Lord Johnson here in May. Chris Hoy went to the UK in April. The Lord Mayor of the City of London was here in June. There's others trips planned. So that's good. And the focus has largely been focused on business. But when you get into those broader questions, ask yourself, why did Lord Justice Wolfe get invited to chair Astana? Probably because it's instant credibility, and that was projecting out. That doesn't necessarily follow that it then created huge prosperity for Astana. So I think my sense with some of this is those things will play out. Business has to adapt. What it wants more than anything, frankly, is a bit of certainty and a bit of clarity on what it needs to do to comply in that environment, rather than necessarily engage and play in that environment and start to opine about whether one thing's right and the other thing's wrong.
Thank you, Paul. I'm a very bad timekeeper. I'm obviously overrun now. If I'm using my discretion. If there's any burning question from the floor, I can take one. Any question from the floor? If no, then I'm going to ask each speaker to give me one final word for today. Alice, any final words of advice?
I actually hesitate to be the first because every time I become the first, and then Laurence will have something to say quite differently. So anyway, I think it is important for especially for the Hong Kong markets, I'm really focusing on the capital markets, to really stay focused in the course. I know a lot of the lawyers and also audience around us are playing golf as well, in the recreational time. I'm a recreational golfer, I'm terrible high handicap. So what is more important is stay in the course, okay? Keep your eye on the ball. Don't get distracted, because in the golf competition, you're competing with yourself, but you're also competing with your fellow players. So you have to make sure you are just as good, because otherwise, you never get it to the green. You never can get it into, putt into the hole. So this is very important. This is a game of your self-competition, but this is also a game of a peer competition. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Laurence, quickly.
Think less about the mainland, about China, think more about the world. Because at the end of the day, whether we are useful, what we can be useful about, it's no longer about our understanding of the mainland. We have probably gone a long way there and will continue. That's self-propelling by now. Our understanding of mainland is far from perfect, but at this rate, it's just going to accumulate further over time. But looking at our bag of skills and knowledge, I think we are really quite short when it comes to knowing the rest of the world, particularly outside the Anglo-Saxon world. I'm glad to hear ASIFMA, for example, has Belgian speakers, by which I mean Dutch speakers, I assume. I didn't hear whether it was German speakers, but one of the things that FSDC has been trying to do is to understand more about how the world sees Hong Kong. And we want to go track newspapers all over the world and how they report on Hong Kong. It's very easy for us to track what is reported about Hong Kong in the Times, in the Financial Times, in the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. We do that actually regularly because it's all English papers. But we recently went to The Hague for a conference, and some of our friends told us about how the Dutch papers were reporting Hong Kong, and with our head of research on the ground at The Hague, he couldn't read, and we had no ability to support him to read what the Netherlands, what the Dutch press was talking about Hong Kong. And then got me thinking, we pause and think about Hong Kong and say, well, we're international, we know a lot about the world. We know quite a bit about the Anglo-Saxon world. Outside of that, we really do need to catch up a lot.
Thank you, Laurence. Tim, final words?
Yeah, of course there will be challenges and even obstacles lying ahead. But I think we ought to stay very confident of our own ability and capability. And the unique position that Hong Kong is in, we have the one country, two systems, which is a huge advantage for us. And we have the mainland at our back. And we face the world. And we have always been fairly good at that. All we need to do is to re-engage and even work harder. And I'm absolutely sure our future will be brighter than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Paul?
I'm going to repeat my last words. Be ambitious, be adaptable, be Hong Kong.
On that very positive note, thank you very much, and for the panelists, thank you. We will have some souvenirs quickly, because I know that you're all also waiting for our last session, which is on national security law. Even more controversial topic. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for our distinguished speakers. The discussion of session 3 ends here. We will now take a 15-minute tea break before starting session 4. Please help yourself with some refreshments at the foyer. The next session will start at 4:30 p.m. Again, there's no need for online participants to log out the session. See you soon again.